English football Premier League is the greatest league on earth.
Wow. It's an amazing story, and I know that's an important part of your book called The Chairman. Um, and congrats on your book. And one of the things that was really interesting in your book, you have a number of testimonials from different kind of the English soccer royalty, different players and coaches
Yeah,
and leaders in the game.
yeah.
Talk about how you've integrated that into the story.
Well, I was a keynote speaker at the Women's Global Football Conference in Athens in 2023. And there was a young man called Ed Bowers, who is a prolific podcaster. And he was one of the moderators. And I mentioned I was interested in writing a book. And he said, Jeff, if you need any help, I'm happy to help. And I was thinking more of the end product rather than the creativity of the book, because, you need somebody sort of fixated like yourself, who is, the master of social media, the master of podcasts, and you are the king. I've just enjoyed your podcast so much since you blessed me with this very kind invitation to join you today. And as we started to develop in the early days, he said to me, one of my favorite books is Carlo Ancelotti's autobiography. And, outside of Pep Guardiola, obviously I'm biased as a Manchester City supporter. Um, you know, Carlo Ancelotti is one of the greatest managers on earth. Real Madrid, Paris Saint-Germain, Manchester, Chelsea. And in his book, he writes a narrative where hypothetically he will say, in my time with Chelsea, we did this, we did that, we achieved this, we didn't achieve that. Then in the words of John Terry, and, with Real Madrid, in the words of Ronaldo, Zinedine Zidane, and all the world's glitterati are contributing to this book. And I thought to myself, wow, I know everybody in football in my various roles. I'm on the FA Council. I'm an ambassador for the England national team, so I travel with the team. I was on the board of the English Soccer League before we got promoted to the Premier League. The Premier League clubs voted me to represent them on the FA Council. So I'm going to start asking one or two people if they'd like to contribute to my book. So I spoke first of all to Sir Gareth Southgate, and said, Gareth, would you mind saying a few words in my book? Absolutely, Jeff, whatever you need. Then Debbie Hewitt, who's the chair of the FA, Richard Scudamore, who's Mr. Premier League. There was Steve Parish, chairman of Crystal Palace and owner of Crystal Palace, the Brentford owner, and then from my army days, Brigadier Andy Griffiths from my charities, and then my own players made contributions, and suddenly we've got 30 people. And what I love about it, Wayne, more than anything, is that it breaks up the narrative. And I'd rather people spoke about me than me speaking about myself. My parents have taught me always to be humble. And that's something I've always had my feet firmly on the floor. And even as, for 17 years and 10 years at Premier League chairman, there's only 20 on earth. Um, a lot have egos. As the Premier League, is rich in wealth. And I've always remained the humble person that I love to be, and I love giving more than taking. So the book, I love the book because there are people talking about my journey. I'm talking about Rosie as well, which I love as well, how they've seen what she has contributed to football. This lovely little community sports club, the smallest club ever to grace the Premier League. And oh my God, we are now rubbing shoulders, with the world's greatest players and the world's most notorious, chairman, chief executives. And, I have a funny story that made me, it is in the book, but it made me realize that we'd arrived. My very first Premier League conference, AGM, was in Harrogate. And I walked through the door and Sir Chips Keswick, who is blue blood English, this is like English royalty, and chairman of Arsenal, said to me, and he spoke in a very English gentleman voice. Hello, old boy. He said, I'm Sir Chips Keswick from Arsenal. And I started talking like this, and I'm going, oh, hello, I'm Jeff Mostyn from AFC Bournemouth. And he thought, Jesus, I've never heard of AFC Bournemouth. And he said, come and join me for a glass of wine. So I did. And he said, how did you get down here today? And I said, I flew down. He said, oh, my God, old boy. He said, in your own aircraft. I said, no, I used Flybe, our local aircraft, on this occasion. And I literally went upstairs, phoned my chief executive, and I said, Christ, I said, we've actually arrived. Sir Chips thinks I've got my own aircraft. And it was the difference between traveling to a game on a bicycle, for 10 years in the lower leagues of the English League to the Premier League. And I think in a roundabout way, I think I've answered you coming back to your question about the pyramid. Only in a pyramid could you ever reach the pinnacle of world football. And the English Premier League, I am biased, so for all your listeners today, please forgive me. I'm not making comparisons with the MLS, but the English Football Premier League is the greatest league on earth. That's why so many people watch it week in and week out. And we could never have achieved this as an American club, as an MLS club. So for an owner, the risk is so high because you can invest so much money in a desire to get to the Premier League, but if you're relegated, the whole pack of cards can come tumbling down. And with a franchise, you're safe financially.
It's fascinating. And, one of the things that I'm just really curious is the day that the day that you guys qualified to go and move up to the Premier League. What happened at that game, and how did you feel, you and Rosie and the rest of the team, and what was that like when you were all together, maybe in the quiet moment after everyone kind of left? What was that like?
It was almost, it felt like I'd been hypnotized. That, there's that saying that you have to pinch yourself to feel that it was real. But I think that just the moment was, it should never have happened. This couldn't happen. When we were promoted at the game against Bolton, I don't know whether you've ever seen the video of me in the dressing room. That's something to behold. If you look on, and your listeners and viewers, go onto YouTube, Jeff Mostyn, dressing room scene, AFC Bournemouth. You have to watch this. It was probably the most embarrassing thing in my entire life that's turned out to be how I'm introduced to all my public speaking gigs. I'm up in the double box with our Russian owner at the time because I'd sold to him. I was still the chairman throughout his ownership. So really proud to drive the club forward. And I realized we'd been in the double box celebrating. And, with Russians, as you would know, shots are the theme of the day. So we've got vodka in there, we've got scotch in there. And what is absolutely unbelievable, I actually said, I think we've had more shots on target than the players actually had on the pitch. I must have had about 10 shots within 5 minutes of the final whistle going.
Gosh.
And then I realized I haven't seen the boys in the dressing room. So I leaped down to the dressing room and I literally used an expletive that went viral because Sky Television had gone in and warned the boys about their language before I got in the dressing room. And I looked like a mad professor, Wayne. The boys have lifted me up. They're giving me the biggest spanking of my life. And it just showed the relationship that I've had with my players that probably no other chairman, ever had. And that is something that I'm so proud of. The relationship with the players, the staff, and my beloved supporters has never changed from day one to today.